Hey folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple review, and today this is one of my more highly anticipated games that I was expecting at Essen. Ever since I watched a couple of reviews on it, I was like, oh yeah, this could be really decent. This could be something new, something slightly innovative, maybe, and just bringing in a fresh new look at worker placement, which, let's be honest, is kind of saturated with a lot of games, and frequently we see the same old stuff come out, the same style of worker placement, the same victory point condition, and so on and so forth. So this one had similarities, but I heard about certain differences with this, and this is what has got me into like, ooh, really want to try Architects of the West Kingdom. Now, stick with me, it is a small box, and the title is boring. Stick with me though, it gets better. This is designed by Shem Phillips, who also did Raiders of the North Sea, as well as a couple of others in that North Sea sort of series. Now, granted, they weren't all good. Explorers was, wasn't a fan of shipwrights at all, but Raiders of the North Sea was a solid worker placement game. You should definitely check that one out if you haven't already. But this is kind of like the first in possibly a new series of games. We had Of the North Sea, this is now Of the West Kingdom, so maybe we'll get more in this series. I don't know, I haven't really looked it up, nor do I overly care, because it's not like I cared so much whether it was the North Sea in the previous one. West Kingdom isn't exactly singing to me as a setting I desperately need. But the idea with this, though, is that Renegade Game Studios is behind it, as well as Garp Hill Games, and when it comes to Renegade Game Studios, they have certainly come into their own lately. Certainly since the beginning of 2017, they've started releasing games where I can go, ooh, I really like this one. Oh, and I really like that one as well. And that one's, not the best thing ever, but I still like it. It's really well produced and colourful. And they don't seem to put out any games that I would consider bad. I can't think of a really bad game by Renegade Game Studios. They just seem to be consistently decent. They're releasing a lot of products. Granted, they are in sort of conjunction with other publishers, but yeah, they're really starting to go up my rankings in one of my favourite publishers. And so I was definitely keen to get a chance to demo this at Essen, grab a copy, and then take it home to play some more games. So what's this one all about? Architects of the West Kingdom is set at the end of the Carolingian Empire. I'm going to try saying that when you're drunk, I'm not even sure I pronounced that right. Circa 850 AD. As royal architects, players are competing to impress their king and maintain their noble status in the domain. Players will need to collect raw materials, hire apprentices, and keep a watchful eye on their workforce as they seek to construct various landmarks throughout the land, as well as assist with the construction of the resonant cathedral. However, this is a twist on normal worker placement games. Normal worker placement will have you simply place a worker down, resolve the action, and then at the end of a round, retrieve them. Not so much here. With Architects, you have 20 workers. You will put one at a time, and the actions get gradually better and better the more workers you put in a space. But you have to be careful. Rival architects will stop at nothing to slow down your progress, and they are able to gather up your workforce, whether under black market pretenses or just false pretenses, and deposit them in the guardhouse in order to gain a new source of income. And you will have to go to the guardhouse in order to retrieve your workers. So forget rounds, they don't exist here. This is a perpetually cycling game in which you are responsible for getting your workers back, not the game. As the game continues on, you will decide whether you are going to remain virtuous or be found in the company of thieves and black marketeers. Raising your status on the virtue track will gain you victory points at the end, but will restrict your ability to gain easy resources through more shady dealings. However, go the opposite way and you will face the possibility of having negative victory points at the end. However, you will have a much cheaper and a much easier time gathering resources and performing actions. So you can choose which path you want to do, and you must decide whether you want to be virtuous or shady. Either way, you better be prepared to put up with the pros and cons of your choice. The apprentices all come in various different guises and have abilities on them which can be comboed together with other apprentices in order to build a reliable engine. Play continues until the guild hall, which is where you will go to construct your buildings or assist with the cathedral, is filled with its maximum capacity of workers which are placed there permanently throughout the game. As soon as the capacity is reached, everyone totals up their victory points through various sources, and of course, the winner is the one with the most.
Of course!
So in terms of presents on the table, this doesn't look like the most like out there imposing game that there is, because it is a relatively small box. Although it is quite refreshing to actually see that they've managed to create a game where everything still fits in the box fine, but it doesn't have to be huge in order to just remain on your shelf. So don't be fooled by the small size, there's a fair amount of game packed in here. Component quality is pretty sound. You have got wooden resource tokens for everything from marble, gold, stone, wood and that. And granted, they're fairly basic shapes, so we're not talking like Stonemaier Games level of detail here. But they're decent. It's wooden tokens. It's better than just having cardboard tokens any day. The money, again, is just cardboard, although if you're willing to spend the extra money, you can do what I do and buy the metal coins for this, which I highly recommend if you're going to get this game and keep it for a while. The metal coins are nice, they're solid. It's a bit weird that they don't have multiple denominations, for like 1, 3 and 5, they're all just ones. But, it is nice to be able to go, right, I put all your guys in prison, get 8 money. Ooh, look at the lovely coins, look at the lovely coins. So, that's a side-on addition. But even just using the cardboard coins is fine. The artwork is definitely a high point for this, though. It is vibrant, it is colourful. If you like the way that Raiders of the North Sea looked, you will easily like the way this one looks. Everything is bright, colourful, easy to tell. The graphic design is dirt simple to understand. The iconography is actually pretty straightforward as well. And if you don't quite get what an apprentice or building does, you can simply just look it up in a handy separate rulebook, which you can keep on the table. And as I say, it's separate from the main rulebook. But of course, components aren't everything. There's theme and mechanics to consider as well. Theme-wise, hit and miss. I barely could pronounce the name of the empire. Carolingian? I don't even know what that even is. Is that made up or is that part of history? I have not got a clue. But, 850 AD, whatever. It's another historical euro. So the theme is kind of like, who cares, whatever. Now, that's not to say the theme is entirely lost here, though. It's a generic euro, it's generic medieval, well, not medieval, but, generic historical gathering of resources to build. Where the theme comes out a little bit more in this game compared to others, and this is one that you're going to have to kind of use your imagination a little bit, is the whole gathering of your workers or gathering other people's workers to stick them in prison. Because the idea is that you can, at your leisure, go to a certain space to round up people's meeples. Because when you put too many on a space, it becomes very tempting for someone to come along and go, ooh, I'll just gather up all 5 of those because that action is too powerful for you. On my board they go. I'll stick them in prison. Hey, Your Majesty, I brought the prisoners. And that's one of my favourite Futurama lines. And and you get money for it. And while they're in prison, there's a chance that they will, make the person lose virtue or gain debt, which is bad, negative victory points, for having too many people there when, the markets and various things reset. So it's their incentive to go to the guardhouse and get them out. Now, granted, you're kind of doing a lot of that during the game, so it kind of stands to reason that whether you're accusing someone of being shady or not, what's the legal system like here or something? Because it's kind of, you're constantly going, well, take them. They were mean. They were doing shady deals, sir. I saw them. They would definitely go to prison. And it's like very easy for people to just suddenly end up in prison and get released here. So, and you're getting money for depositing them in the guardhouse, which I never quite got. Normally, I don't remember being able to sort of go to a local constabulary and suddenly go, oh yeah, I found this guy shoplifting in Sainsbury's the other day. There you go. Oh, £10, sweet, yay, sweet. Was it like mystery shopper or something? I don't know, but so the theme is kind of a little bit all over the shop, but it's a minor part. You certainly do get a little bit of thematic nature from the whole how players act with, I've gathered up these meeples. Do I want to put them in the prison now? And get some money, or should I hold on to them because the opponent's going to have to pay money in order to get them off my board? And as long as I'm holding them, the opponent has less meeples to work with. So maybe I want to just hold on to these guys, maybe torture them a little, and just keep them handy. So there's a little bit of theme there, but yeah, it's not desperate. You don't really need to care too much about it here, and that's saying something coming from me. So in other words, are the mechanics good? This is where Architects of the West Kingdom really, really shines. For starters, it is wonderfully streamlined. The rules of this are dirt simple. There's plenty enough in it. They've got the different spaces, and all the apprentices and the various buildings, but the rules are straightforward. The turn sequence is easy. You just put a guy down and resolve it. All the action spaces tell you on the board what they do based on how many workers are there. The iconography is clear. The graphic design is clear. The rulebook is not particularly long. It is not very confusing. There are pictorial explanations. It's an easy game to teach and get into, making this one of the, I'm not going to call it light, I'd say midweight, but it's one of the easier worker placement games to get people into. Certainly not gateway level, certainly not like first step, but maybe next step? It's not a difficult game to play, and yet there's a good amount of depth in what apprentices you pick up, what buildings you build, the combos you build. Do I want to be virtuous or do I not? When's the best time for me to start gathering up some of my own workers? Maybe I should gather up other people's. Is he getting a bit too much benefit from that quarry because he's got 4 people there and he's getting like 4 or 5 a stone a time? Maybe I should go round them up. But problem is, if I'm doing that, maybe I'm slowing my own progress down. So there's a lot of tactical and strategic decisions you have to make. Certainly this game's got a lot of depth, and kudos for it. But it's not complex. Teaching this game for me was an absolute piece of cake. And anybody who has played pretty much any worker placement before will get the gist of how this works. Except you just have to tell them about the twist that they don't retrieve their workers. And believe me, I've played this with people who are used to heavy Euro games, and it's thrown them off because they're so used to going, all right, so when do I get my workers back? Well, I don't. Eh? It confuses them, the whole get out. But you quickly get them to realise, oh, so that's how it works. But it does throw them off for a kilter because they're kind of so used to that whole structured layout. And I love the fact that this is not structured. There is no round. Rounds don't exist. You place a worker, you resolve the action, next player's turn. Rinse, repeat. That is it. There is no end of round. There is only a small reset, and that only happens when certain spaces get used up and that, but that doesn't trigger a new round. It just changes a little bit in the market and, gives people negative debt and virtue depending on who's in the guardhouse. That's it. There's no start of round nonsense, no end of round nonsense, no cleanup phase, no nothing. It just feels really fluid. It just keeps going and going and going until the game ends. And there's just something very refreshing about that. But on top of that, the twist of how the worker placement works is, I don't know if this is another game. Please, anybody out there who knows a game that does what this does with the whole worker placement, having to go get your workers back manually and the whole prison thing, if there's another game that does this, please tell me, because I want to find out more about it, and if possible, I want to play it. But as far as I can tell, this is a new idea. It's, maybe it's been done once before, I have no idea, but I'm certainly for the moment calling this new, innovative, certainly very different. It gives you a different feel from every other generic sort of ancient history, worker placement game. Because you sort of think, generic theme, yeah, you build buildings, they've got combos, we've seen it before, as fun as it is. But that whole aspect of, I've got to get my workers back, because you start placing workers out and, the actions get better and better as you put more down. That's not done a lot in a lot of worker placement games. It's normally just one worker, one action. And on top of that, you've got this cool aspect of, well, nobody's rounded up any of my workers, so great. Oh, I'm starting to run out. I'm going to need to get some eventually. Maybe I should start rounding my own ones up. But then it's great when you almost want people to arrest your workers. It's kind of weird. Because, you'll have like, I've only got 5 out of my 20 workers left. I could do with getting some. Oh, if you just arrested a bunch of my workers and you're going to get some money for it, by all means, put them in prison. Yeah, they deserve it. Yeah, get your money. Right, get out of prison quick. Grab my workers. And sometimes you might break them out of your opponent's boards. I've done that before. It's not cheap. You might have to take a debt in order to do it. But there have been times where it's like, you've got some of mine, you've got some of mine, you've got some of mine. You know what? None of you are getting any money for these guys. I'm going there. I'll pay some money. Give me all my workers back. It's another tactical choice you have to make. But it injects a unique perspective on a worker placement game that, whether it's been done before, I don't know. Like I say, feel free to correct me in the comments if you know of a game. But certainly from everything I've got in my collection, and I like worker placement as a theme, as a mechanic, nothing else in my collection, as far as I'm aware, does anything similar to this. So there's a lot of good worker placement games in this collection, and there's a lot of other worker placement games I have played and don't own. I don't recall any that do what Architects of the West Kingdom did, and I applaud it for trying something different, because that's what I want to see in more games. Enough with the same old, same old. So the game itself, takes from 1 to 5 players and says on the box 60 to 80 minutes. Hit and miss. Typically though, you should expect to get this game wrapped up in about 90, and that depends on how AP some of the players are. I find that if you play this with people who are relatively quick with their turns, or who have adapted to the system quite quick, particularly if they've already played Raiders, because there's a few similarities with the way it looks and that, then turns are actually pretty quick. I mean, I put a worker down. I get 2 silver because I've got a worker there already. Sweet. I put another worker there. I get some more silver. What do I need next turn? I need a stone. I got 2 workers there already. Fine, I'll put one there, get 3 stone. Done. Next person. Turns can be really, really fast, even if you're building a building. I'll go here. I'll build this building, pay these resources. Done. Next person. There is very little in the game that will drag a turn out. So if the game is taking long, it's mainly because people aren't building, and why you should be building, because that's the main way to get victory points, you idiot, but also AP. And I have played this with occasional people who are AP, and they can drag it out a bit, so be warned if you play this with an AP player, because they might sort of drag it a little bit too long, but even then, you're talking 90 minutes. None of these games have gone anywhere near 2 hours. And with less players, 2 to 3, you could feasibly get this done in 60 odd minutes. 60 to 75, something like that. But you're basically talking an hour to an hour and a half for a typical game of Architects of the West Kingdoms. Any longer than that, and you blame the players. Because this is streamlined enough that it just doesn't take long. Doesn't take long to set up, doesn't take long to explain the rules, the gameplay is fluid and fast, and the scoring is dirt simple. Buildings, cathedral, virtue track, and a couple of negatives for debt and debt and little bits like that. Other than that though, pretty straightforward. Now you can add a little bit of complexity to this game by throwing it, like reversing the sides of the player boards. So you can have them generic, or you can have not only a special ability, but also a unique starting setup for each of your architects. And certainly I recommend for your first game, play generic. Play generic for the first time, just so people get used to the game, and then straight after, flip them over, because they add a great amount of replay value, and the differences on how each of those architects will play based on their starting setup and what they, what their ability is, add some great variety to the game. So with Architects of the West Kingdom, I really love this game. This is a fantastic worker placement game. If I've got any nitpicks, and they are mostly nitpicks, it's that the only thing I'm worried about is the balancing of the virtue track. I have played this game both trying the virtuous strategy and the non-virtuous strategy. I found that if you go too far down that virtue track, you struggle to make up those points, no matter how easily you can get the money and the resources. Whereas if you go high in the virtue track, yes, you're slower on getting the resources, but the point gain is quite substantial, particularly compared to someone who's losing points on the virtue track while you're gaining them. It's a pretty big swing. And I have managed to do well with, being bad on the virtue. I've won with being sort of bad on the virtue, but eventually recovering. But I have yet to see someone win who has done really badly on the virtue, like really low down, and stayed that way and still won. Now, they've done well, although sometimes they have also come dead last. I certainly do not recommend any beginner player tries doing the low virtue strategy. But it does make me wonder if it's kind of gunning you to be reasonably virtuous, or at least be not stupidly low in virtue by the game end. It's going to take more games to find that out. I don't think it's a massive issue. It's fun to play the low virtue strategy, and I think you just have to factor in that maybe as low as your virtue might get, you might need to build yourself back up by the end of the game, and if you do so, you're going to gain a fair amount of points, and you've already gained some momentum from having the black market available to you. So, like I say, there's different ways to play, different combos, so replay value is good, and I will say that is a small nitpick for me. So I really love this. This is a fantastic worker placement game. I really can't think of any particular negatives. The apprentice cards are great. Different combos, different ways to play. Buildings, variety. Maybe a little bit of extra variety would be good, but otherwise, there's a decent amount of them. There's not as many spaces to go to on the board, but then the game is not meant to be particularly complex. It's meant to be pretty easy to pick up. It's streamlined. It's not hard to understand. It's colourful. It's bright. I'm giving this a 10. Giving this a 10. This is a game this is going to stay in my collection for a long time. This is easily top 100 material. This is just one of those refreshing changes to a genre that has become oversaturated with time, and it just gives me something that I can go, you know what, we got 90 minutes, would you like to play a work and placement game with a good amount of depth that looks great on the table and doesn't take me an eternity to teach it? Then Architects of the West Kingdom is a start. I liked Raiders of the North Sea. I think that's a solid game as well. This, I think, is better. So if you enjoyed Raiders, you owe it to yourself to grab this game. It is fantastic. So that's it for me. I'm going to stop before I get too giddy with this and before my lights die out. So take care. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review. And remember, no matter how many of your fellow friends and meeples you're arresting, just remember, it's only a game. So be sure to release them eventually. Take care, and I'll see you on the next episode.